Greetings. Is this happening to me or is this happening for me? It's a really difficult question to ask when it's happening at all. Like when you're in it, I mean to say. When everything's kind of happening at once. And there is pain and difficulty and challenge and resistance to change or whatever it may be, you know. These times when everything seems to hit at once and you feel like you might just not make it through at all. In that space, it's very difficult to ask this question, is this happening for me? Because it sure as heck feels like it's happening to me, right? Have you ever shook your fist at the sky and asked why? Why me? Now I will say a really healthy practice, if you want to catch up to for me side of the events real time, is to ask why me always. Like, I mean, when times are good and running smooth, do you ever remember to ask, why is this happening to me? Right? As you are forced to when things are challenging, when things are difficult, right? I mean, it's like, literally, why is this happening to me? I mean, it's not only a great philosophical inquiry, but it's also a survival technique sometimes, right? I mean, a lot of times, you know, this is happening to me is also like pointing your fingers at outside mechanisms, and that can just be a survival technique so you don't fall prey to taking the blame for every experience that you're having in life. Now, when things are going right, you, however, in that type of training, might miss the opportunity for taking responsibility for the bliss. Yeah. Many of you, I'm sure, have read your Carlos Castaneda or worked with different dreaming techniques, like some of those that he recommends in his wonderful works. One that I had been taught back when I did a lot of dream work was throughout the course of the day, look at your watch. And by the way, wear a watch. And then throughout the course of the day, look at your watch. You'll notice, by the way, I don't wear a watch. I wear this scratch these days. And so it's just like, check the time. Check the time. Just make it a habit, right? Don't get hung up on what time means or anything. It's like, it's not really about what time it is in the waking life. It's so that when you're in dream, you will just have this habitual need to look at your watch. And if you wear a watch every day in waking world, typically you're wearing that watch in dream world, and it's easier therefore to notice that when you check the time in dream world, things are weird, right? Typically, like timekeeping devices like a watch look Looney Tunes in a dream. They look like a kind of melty Dali clock, or maybe the hands are moving really fast or backwards, or maybe there's 5 hands instead of 2 on the watch, like that kind of trip, right? And then when you see that in a dream, if you allow yourself to not be shocked, you can stay in the dream, but now you know you're dreaming, and then, you know, then it's on, right? Now you're lucid in the dream. And while that's a really wonderful technique, and it's something I recommend you try if you at this time in your life are interested in waking up inside your dreams, you know, which, by the way, you can kind of lose a lot of rest if you make too much of a habit of that. So be careful. I'm really only mentioning that to use as a vehicle to ride into this space. If things are going okay for you, make a regular practice of asking, why me? Right? Make a regular practice of contemplating, is this happening to me or for me? Right? So like a new love falls in your lap. straight out of Venus. Why me? And look, the low-hanging fruit is, oh, it's a karmic reward for that shit show I've been through and for doing the work and, you know, repatterning and that, which is great. That's not true. But be careful. Because if you're only in the worldview that things are good because they've been so bad and you've earned it by growing through the madness, you're actually, I would suggest, inviting more madness. Why do I say that? Because as far as I'm concerned, the whole reason why we are here, and I mean why we are incarnated on Earth, and perhaps this would apply to any incarnation in an experience of time and space, the whole reason why we are here is to grow. And it is absolutely true that what we go through, we grow through. Okay? Now, I mean, you can, if you're really good at it, you can actually experience growth through meditation, through contemplation, through study. But, I mean, let's say you're contemplating, you know, some kind of like astrological aspect, right? A lot of people here, like myself, are drawn to the cosmic craft. Or some of you will be familiar with the work like the gene keys, right? So let's just say you're contemplating one of these keys, or you're contemplating, oh, something in the I Ching, or you're contemplating, you know, a strong Mars, Moon, Pluto, Yod situation in your natal chart, or in any chart. You can certainly grow through your contemplations. However, I imagine you will find, if you look at these times that you have grown through like non-action, through contemplation, or I should say non-experience, you don't, right? So you're reading about something, you're hearing about something, and it invokes in you a memory of a similar thing that you've been through, some experience you've had in life, where you can kind of connect that information with, yes, and then in that self-reflection of an actual experience, there's growth. Then we can do this, we can attempt to do this like culturally, right? So it might be something that you haven't like personally experienced or consciously experienced, yet you're looking at history or something like this, right? And wishing to learn your lessons from. And, you know, there's a cool question there. It's like, well, did you go through that anyway? But you hear what I'm saying, right? Like our earthly incarnation typically shows growth through earthly experience, and I'm speaking elementally when I say that word, which is to say something in the body, something in the physical, something that has happened, right? And I should not limit it in that way, because your emotional experience, your feelings, right, the amazing revelations in the mental space that can happen in response to a kind of embodied experience, like all absolutely valid for growth. But very importantly, regardless, we grow through what we go through. And you're going through experience, not contemplations of someone else's experience. And that's like an important thing to be with, okay? Where I find we can often go wrong with we grow through what we go through, which I feel is an absolute. So are we reconnected? You know, I don't want to have to only sit inside a room to be able to share like this. And this is kind of one of my only times where I have free space, which is driving to get the kid or back from. Anyway, I should, I guess, speed things up. Yeah, so I read on some church sign driving by, we grow through what we go through, and it was like, that's right. I think that the challenge is to be able to live in that truth without falling prey to the idea that this necessitates a paradigm of no pain, no gain. And it's a difficult thing to do as a, I guess I'll use this word that I don't love, but awakening being, which is to say that you have claimed self-reflection and you are willing to take a good look at yourself and adapt, and as a result probably have a very different view of the world, and you're willing to look at that madness too and to reflect and shift. Right, so typically that awakening, I'll just stay there, you awaken from nightmares, not from dreams. Now you can awaken within a dream, and typically will stay there. Were you to awaken within a nightmare, almost instantaneously it will no longer be a nightmare. It is very hard to become lucid within a nightmare, because you having the controls, your hands on the controls, just quickly shift it. The way to be there, by the way, especially if you have like a reoccurring thing, and whether this is in your, sleeping nightmares or even daytime nightmares, is to contemplate here in the head or the heart, the better. And the gig is maybe the worst time to say this while driving through a tunnel, because I imagine we might lose connection again. Should I wait? La 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 la. It's a long tunnel. It's a long tunnel, this thing called life. Sometimes it feels like I can't find the light, but if I just keep driving, one spin after the next, I will find myself on the other side. Right. Where were we? It's funny, I thought I had something important to say, so I wanted to save it. And now I realize it must not be important at all, because it's gone. Oh, right. Getting back into a nightmare, being lucid in the nightmare. Right, so like if you have a reoccurring thing, like take control back, right? Put the pen in your hand, rewrite the script, like literally. Like it can actually be really, really good to write it, and write it as if you're creating like a film or a short story or whatever, right? And you write your dream right to the part where it feels like you have no release, no escape. It actually might be when you wake up, if it is a nighttime dream, or when you just fall into despair, if it's a like kind of repetitive pattern in your waking life that it feels like you just cannot move on from. Yeah, it can be really helpful to kind of write the story up until that just like impossible part, and then finish it in a good way. Right, like it all leads to, right? So I mean, show me like a really wonderful heart happy film that doesn't have its super challenging middle part, right? So like the crazy, difficult, horrendous thing that is the nightmare you wake up from is actually just the middle part of like the most beautiful story ever told. Yeah? So rewrite the script. And then live that. So anyway, it's very difficult to awaken from a dream, because if you awaken within the dream, you kind of want to stay there. And if you don't, you want to stay something and you want to stay there anyway. You wake up from a nightmare. Hence, go look at, the happenings in September, some 22 years ago, with actual perceptive gaze that's willing to look logically and rationally, and without the programming at evidence, and see what happens for you, right? There's a nightmare you can wake up from if you choose, right? So anyway, we've all like had these realize that or those many difficult times in their lives were also the greatest catalyst for their growth. Right? That's healthy to have that understanding. Where it can lead to disharmony is then buying into, and this typically happens subconsciously, to the idea that you're only going to go through really miserable happenings. And then the evolutionary soul wants to stay in the framework of miserable happenings because we are here to grow. Yes? So it's very important to continue growing when things are good. Now, some of that can just look like, I now have my wits about me. I'm not so hung up on all the things I have to do just to survive. It's not as difficult in this moment. And so I'm going to study. So I'm going to create. Right? The greatest way you can study is to actually create something. It might be, I'm not so hung up over that, my ex and my heart is okay again and I've fallen in love. And I mean, the greatest way you can study is to love. However, if you are set, and typically, again, this is not happening in conscious space, on the idea that I grow through what I go through only applies to no pain, no gain paradigm. And the impatient lady honks at you behind you because you stopped for a pedestrian. You should probably just go really slowly after that. Actually, no. Haven't we all been in a hurry before? So, compassion. Right, if you're stuck in this place of no pain, no gain, then the reason why you'll attract a partner is for a heartbreak. Because heartbreak will get you growing super fast. Usually not immediately, or at least consciously immediately. You probably act a fool for a while. But, acting a fool is an amazing curriculum here in the Earth classroom. Especially if you're willing to take some time and self-reflect, right? I mean, have you ever just watched yourself acting foolishly? Typically, once we catch up real time, we'll just stop acting foolishly, right? But there's actually there's a treasure in that space of I want to watch myself act like a fool for a while. And then really kind of draw that back to its roots, yes? And you'll miss that opportunity if you never act a fool, which is exactly what happens for narcissists, right? Because they're acting like a fool, but they don't know that they are. See what I mean? We're all foolish, and not in every moment. And it's the times when we are, there are actually treasures that you don't get to open at all times in life. So we just don't want to miss opportunities. That's the thing I want to get back to. So, and I want to that it tends to be at some point when you're dreaming and you look at your watch and the watch is a dream watch and it's all weird and you're like, holy, okay, I'm dreaming. And then suddenly you're lucid. So what I want to suggest for us is practices when we are in a different kind of space. Let me say practices when things are going well that will also be very powerful to help us wake up within the nightmare when things are going difficult. Because when things are really difficult in our lives, when it's all happening at once and we just want to quit, the kind of, again, a survival mechanism is shake the fist at the sky and why me, and maybe point fingers and blame or whatever, right? It's very difficult to be in that space of this is happening for me, not this is happening to me. If this is happening to me, which in general is quote unquote victim consciousness, is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, if you're in there and then you're shaming yourself for being in that space, you're not solving the problem, you're just exponentially making it worse. And then we've all been there, right? You're in this feedback loop that just completely snowballs out of control. So be careful, have respect for yourself. Yeah? So a practice when things are good is why me, right? Why is this happening to me? As a legitimate question, as a necessary response to life. is just checking the watch while you are awake, so you will remember to check your watch when you are asleep, right? And the why me, that's not really what time it is, or that's not the checking the watch. The thing is, like, when things are going well and you ask why me, you tend to like find more interesting answers than you can when things are so immensely challenging, right? And asking that question just makes it feel like you'll fall apart. Like, asking that question again, it's more of like a survival technique when things are super hard than anything else. Yeah. And if you're able to ask why me in like that kind of self-reflective, alive, alert, conscious space, right, then you start finding a place and trying not to like just fall prey to hubris when we do, right? But you start finding a place where you can take like healthy responsibility for your life. That's a very difficult place to be when times are difficult and it's all happening at once. So there are great tools that can help, like, you know, my chosen tool is astrology. So astrology, sometimes when you're in the thick of it and you why me, well, you can see at least a coincidence of, well, there's all these planetary timings that kind of suggest things should not be all that easy. Now, does that... I'm seeing somebody ask, just joined, what are we talking about? I invite you to rewind, because if I go through all of that again, we're gonna have to go through all of that again to get here. In general, I'm talking about working on taking responsibility for our experience in life and seeing that things that are happening to us are actually happening for us, and actually happening with us or by us. So astrology can be really a helpful tool. It can be the exact opposite of that as well. Right? Astrology can be a very convenient space to just point your finger outside of yourself and say it's that, and it's done in 8 months, so just deal with it. It can be it's that, and why is that part of my curriculum? When I say that, it's like, you know, there's behind that a thing that I really can't know about, but it's like, why did I choose this? Why did I choose this? How does this help me? How does this change me in a way that I should change? How does this promote growth? Healthy growth, but you know, healthy is a redundant word as an adjective for growth. And the more we can do that when things are cool, the more capacitive we will have, right? So this is like, this is like one of the reasons why the great musician practices slowly. Like cats that can play really fast practice really slowly. Because it's not about playing fast. It's about playing. And when you're moving really quickly, like when you don't give each note its time to come alive, then it's not really a note at all. When you practice slow, which I'm not great at, but when I do, I get much better, much more quickly. It's like a really ironic thing, right? But when I do, then it's like, wow, every note is like a soul. And I'm just like breathing life into it and really like being with it before I move on to the next one. And then when I play fast, it's like each of these fast moving notes has a soul because I've spent time with it. You see what I mean? So this idea of like practicing contemplation, purposeful growth while we're in a more blessed experience than at the times when we're kind of living in the waking nightmare helps us when we're in that nightmare and things are moving so quickly, like just be present and be steady, centered, and involved. So responsible is this weird word that invokes too much pain, but I mean like an active participant in all that is. But if you want to get hung up on politics or something like outside of you that you might be experiencing anyway, just make sure you're really contemplating your experience of that thing versus that thing alone, or else you're running away from you. If you want to be tripping on something that happened 15 years ago, make sure you're tripping on your experience of it at that time and your experience of it now and moments in between, right? Like that's where the opportunity lives. And that's like a beautiful space, yeah? Is this happening to me or is this happening for me? The answer is the latter, but not when you're in it. I mean, it's still true. I mean, we need to be really careful if we're in a like tender space where we're like sitting with a friend or counseling somebody and they're in a really tricky place to just, I see so many people just spitting out these like doctrines of the new cage, as I like to call the new age sometimes. And I kind of am guilty of that right now, which is why I'm saying this. Like, you want to be really careful, and especially with yourself, not to just say like, I'm doing this, this is me, I'm doing, this to myself, because it can just so quickly lead to I'm bad. So instead of take responsibility for, I would say participate with. And we find our way eventually to, not only is this not happening to me, it's happening for me, but it's happening by me and it's happening of me, right? Now, that's like, I think, mostly an intellectual journey, probably until after the afterlife, whatever that thing is, or the in-between life, or whatever that thing is, But still, it can be really helpful to, like, be in it more, yes? Right, so Nathalie's saying here, create your own fate, yeah. And so, again, to be careful with this and not to, when we're in like I'm in a tricky time right now, and so it can be hard. It can feel heavier than light to say, oh, I am creating my own fate. But if you can do that, right, then it tends to be you, and who could know? But I believe we come out of the difficulty not only more quickly, but with more growth, which I feel is the point of the difficulty in the first place. It's also the point of the ease when it comes around. So I'm going to read this from Winter. According to neuroscience, no memory is factual, and the more times it's remembered, the more the story veers off the actual happening, so you might as well create an empowering version. Yeah, I agree that's true, and sometimes the most empowering version is the heaviest version there is, right? Yeah, I mean, according to I don't know what, but it's not just memories aren't factual, your experience is not factual, right? And so trying to like stay love. the midst of all things is the game. Easier said than done. Sometimes it's easier to do for me if I come on and speak. So thanks for allowing me to do so. And for those of you who are still here, for dealing with those interruptions. But, you know, our memories of this stream being interrupted were actually not factual. How'd it do for you? Please advise me. Nice to see you. Be well. See you in space, y'all.